What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, May 30th, 2018, almost to the end of the month here, almost into summer officially, and obviously middle of the week, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday, and whatever's in store for us. There's a lot of stuff going on here today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in the control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions, observations, opinions, theories, and so forth. And the situation, you know, there are some times when this gets really frustrating, because I've been doing this for almost a quarter of a century, and I never expected to spend this much of my life in a campaign for getting the truth out there. When I saw the evidence that Vince Foster had not, in fact, committed suicide, I figured, oh, I'll get it to the news media, I'll get it to the police, they'll sort that out, and that'll be the end of it, and I'll go back to making movies and stuff. And no, it was the first step discovering just what a horribly corrupt government we do have. And it gets very frustrating that the corruption seems to continue. And everybody inside government, inside corporate media, inside other government seems to think, yeah, this is the way it's supposed to work. We don't understand why you're complaining about things like injustice and high taxes. I mean, you know, we would have thought you would have been used to it by now. Well, no, I'm not. And I don't ever intend to be. I hold it as the highest moral obligation that each generation leave to the next generation a better world than that which was left to us. And my generation has completely and utterly failed that moral obligation. The nation and the world that we are leaving to the next generation are in terrible, terrible shape. And it's not for a lack of trying, but it's really terrible shape. We're still seeing the repercussions and echoes over in Israel and Gaza. And Israel has carried out a massive strike against Gaza, targeting militarily important facilities like a high school during exams. And they're just laying in there saying that anything that Hamas controls is a legitimate target. Well, Hamas is the government of Gaza, so technically they control everything. And that's Israel's logic to go on in there and just lay waste to the place. Now, Israel's airstrike is based on the claim that Palestinians fired rockets into Israel, and as is usually the case with these claims, nothing of any value got hit. They hit dirt. Whatever was fired out of Gaza hit dirt. No buildings damaged, no people hurt, nothing. They're trying to make a big deal out of the fact that there was a kindergarten nearby one of the dirt craters, but again, nobody was hurt. The White House immediately issued an official statement condemning the reprehensible Gaza fire into Israel. Well, so let me see if I've got this right. Israel shooting unarmed protesters for weeks on end with expanding bullets gets no mention from the White House. But when Gaza, or somebody pretending to be Gaza, fires back at Israel after being bombed, because they've already been bombed, Israel started this, but then it's reprehensible. I guess we know who owns Trump, body and soul, because that's certainly the way that he is going. Israel violence on Palestine, yeah, it's just the way things are supposed to be. Palestine dares fire back. My goodness, that's evil, that's reprehensible, they can't be doing that, what's wrong with those people? I don't know about you, but I am really sick and tired of the government of the United States of America constantly bowing and scraping and davening to Tel Aviv. It's humiliating. It's very angering. I don't want to live under foreign puppet rule. The Iraqis don't want to live under foreign puppet rules. The Afghanis don't want to live under foreign puppet rule. The Yemenites don't want to live under foreign puppet rule. Why should the American people be any more comfortable with that? That's a question for all of you to be considering here. As far as Trump and who owns him, story out of Mondo Weiss is apparently the Republican Jewish coalition is emerging as Trump's hub for raising money and for making foreign policy. So Trump is a sellout. You know, he's taking Sheldon Adelson's money and money from this Republican Jewish coalition. And they hand him the money and they say, make war on Iran. And Trump goes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will make war on Iran. What a disappointment. What a terrible, terrible disappointment Trump has become. But again, it's not just Trump. It's systemic. It's the entire federal government system that is composed of people willing to morally compromise, willing to sell their own mother for $1, as Aaron Russo used to put it, willing to sell out to lobbyists and to Israel and the war machine. They have no conscience, or they wouldn't be politicians in the first place. They're there to aggrandize themselves, to have power and wealth and influence, to see their face on TV, and do favors for their friends, no matter what it costs the ordinary American people. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network here. And apparently during Israel's bombing of Gaza, Israel did hit a high school. They bombed a high school. I don't know why they would consider that a legitimate target, but Israel always likes to say that all of their missions are perfectly controlled. We only hit what we intend to hit. Oh, why'd you hit the high school? Well, you know, they're training future terrorists or some such nonsense here. Story out of Information Clearinghouse that cuts right to the heart of this whole issue. This Gaza massacre, Bloody Monday, has exposed international cowardice in the huge number of nations, including the United States, who refuse to stand up to Israel when Israel commits these atrocities. And the White House just proved it again with their statement. Gaza's reprehensible firing into Israel, but no comment on the fact that for weeks prior to this alleged attack, Israel's been shooting unarmed protesters with butterfly bullets designed to inflict maximum injury. Not a single comment. They are cowards. They are afraid of speaking out against Israel. They're afraid of being called anti-Semites. They're afraid of losing their political funding. They are cowards, cowards, cowards. Anybody who refuses to speak out in the face of what Israel has done and is doing to the Palestinians is a moral coward of the first order. Shame on you if you do not have the courage to know right from wrong and to speak out when you're looking at wrong. Story coming out of Mondo Weiss here, reaffirming that Israel started this violence in Gaza. They went on in, they shot missiles on in during the protests, they shot the protesters. But if you look at U.S. corporate media like the New York Times, you'd never know it. The American corporate media is out there basically slanting all of the coverage to say, oh, those evil Palestinians, how could they do it? Poor, helpless, weak little Israel with all their nuclear weapons and modern weapons provided by the United States, and they're just so helpless in the face of those Palestinian slingshots, and we've got to support them as hard as we can. Now, I can't throw up. I don't have the money for a new replacement keyboard. But that's how I feel right about now. It's just angering. And I don't know about you. I grew up in an age where, for the most part, the media was still trusted to report on the news objectively and unbiased. We know now, looking back, that's not always true. Certainly we know how the Hearst newspapers basically lied to sell us the Spanish-American War. but to just see it so in your face these days about propaganda and lies to the American people, to support Israel, to support the war agenda, to support harmful vaccines and harmful GMOs. It's a tsunami of mendacity here. We are the most lied to people on the face of the earth, and I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of it. It's why I keep going, why I keep working at this, why I support RBN, why you should support RBN. Because you're not going to get truth and facts off of any of those TV news channels. Just accept that right now. You're not going to get truth out of anybody who works in the government. Accept that right now. And adjust your thinking accordingly. Now, the good news is that apparently following this massive airstrike into Gaza, Israel and Hamas have reached a ceasefire. And Israel is saying, yeah, it's over for now. And as long as there's no more rocket fire, they will not bomb Gaza. They're probably realizing the optics on this are looking very, very bad because nobody's buying the story that Gaza did anything to deserve this. And in this age of abundant false flags, we're not even really sure who fired whatever it was into the dirt on Israel. So, now, there's an article over here from Middle East Monitor, and it asks a very good question, which is why, with all of this atrocity being inflicted on Gaza by Israel, why the West Bank tends to stay so quiet. And, you know, Gaza is obviously trying to fight for their independence, to fight for their rights. The right to return home, which was guaranteed to them by the United Nations, promised by Israel, and then denied. But in the West Bank, except for some defensive actions against the illegal settlers, there's not a lot going on. And it may be that the West Bank lacks a cohesive political leadership. Hamas is in control of Gaza. They're not in control of the West Bank. Now, down in Gaza, a bunch of boats took off trying to break the blockade. And the boats were carrying students, medical patients, people who were injured by Israel's firing on the unarmed protesters. And they wanted to break the blockade to get, first of all, to get the patients proper medical care so they don't have to amputate their limbs. And unfortunately, the Israeli Navy did intercept them and send them back to the Gaza port. Now, under the Oslo Accords, Israel is obligated to allow the Gazans to fish up to 20 nautical miles from shore. Israel's never allowed that. Usually it's been just 6 miles, and in fact, occasionally Israel will just punitively say it's 3 miles today. Now, if you understand fishing, you understand that fishing within 3 miles of the shore, you're not going to get that much. You need to get out in the deep water if you're really going to have a decent harvest. It's just another way of Israel inflicting collective starvation on the people of Palestine. And another reminder that when Israel makes a commitment in a treaty like the Oslo Accords, don't take it at face value. Israel will lie, just like the United States fails to keep their treaty obligations. They certainly did not keep their obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty with Iran, not to mention just yanking out from the Iran nuclear deal here. Colombian pop star Shakira has canceled her performance in Tel Aviv this year, following pressure from the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And I guess because she's from Colombia, she's still allowed to do that, unlike here in the United States of America, where some states are trying to pass laws saying that support for boycott, divestment, and sanctions is anti-Semitism. You know, the only reason people criticize Israel is they hate the Jewish people. That's nonsense. We're not criticizing the Jewish people. We're not criticizing their religion or their ethnicity. We're criticizing the behavior of their government. And everybody who's out there saying that criticism of the government of Israel is just anti-Semitism, it's as silly as claiming that the only reason people complain about the Nazis is they hate the German people. It's nonsense. And Israel has gotten away with this for decades with the help of the American corporate media. Tunisia's largest union, the General Labor Union, is going to join BDS. The movement is growing and spreading, and Israel is very much afraid of it, and they're trying to basically politic their way out of it. But again, boycotts are a long recognized form of peaceful, nonviolent protest protected by that First Amendment. And somebody needs to take one of these ridiculous anti-Semitism laws right up to the Supreme Court and say that, no, criticism of Israel's government is not hatred of the Jewish people, and it is protected by that First Amendment. It's ridiculous here. Apparently, Israel has now banned the entry of Indonesian tourists into Israel in retaliation for Jakarta suspending visas for Israelis in the aftermath of the Bloody Monday massacre. And Indonesia strongly condemned Israel's brutal actions against Palestinians, and they should. I mean, these Palestinians, these are people and their descendants who were forced out of their homes to make way for the creation of the State of Israel. And the United Nations said they have a right to return to their homes and villages now that the shooting is over. When Israel joined the United Nations, there was a condition placed on their membership, guaranteeing a Palestinian right of return. And Israel said, oh yes, we'll let them go home. Absolutely, you can trust us. We'll let them go home. Never happened. Turning over to Syria, Russia is really beginning to ramp up on decluttering, if you will, Syria, and they're saying now, we're getting from Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, that non-Syrian troops must depart the South de-escalation zone as soon as possible. Now, Russia is asking Iran to leave in order to yank the rug out from under Israel, which is sticking its nose where it doesn't belong in Syria, because the Iranians are there. Russia's saying, Iran, go home. Defuse the situation. This message from Lavrov is aimed squarely at the United States of America, which has no legal right to be in Syria, no business being in Syria. They don't have the permission of Syria's government to be there. Syria never invited them to be there. But the U.S. is just in there, building all these little military bases and saying, oh, yes, we have a right to be here. It's the war on terror. And that gives us the right to go anywhere on planet Earth and stick our nose into other nations' business. Right. Remember, repeat after me, the war on terror, the war on terror, the war on terror. And that makes everything hunky-dory. In a pig's eye here. But Lavrov is definitely sending a message. He's telling the United States it is time for them to get the heck out of Syria. And I would agree with that. Now, the only reason the United States doesn't want to leave Syria is they don't want to be seen as having lost, even though that's exactly what has happened. The real U.S. agenda in Syria was the replacement of Bashar al-Assad with an obedient puppet regime. And after going on 8 years, they've utterly failed to do that. This is going to be the U.S. biggest military setback since the war in Vietnam, and they don't want to have that. They've got a good momentum built up for all these wars that they're working on, all of these countries they've invaded, 7 officially acknowledged wars, and who knows how many covert actions. If they all of a sudden suffer a defeat, everything comes to a crashing halt. That's why they don't want to give up in Syria. Also why they don't want to give up in Afghanistan, even though that is not going well. We're going to take a break for commercials here, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And yes, Republic Broadcasting needs you. We need your support. The big money that is corrupting our society, they can hire all the corporate media that they want to basically lie to you. Because that's what corporate media does. They'll tell you that GMOs are good for you, vaccines are good for you, wars are necessary. That's what they're paid to do. Basically sell you things. Actually, if you think about it, your minds are the product corporate media sells to the advertisers, to the political campaigns. They put on some entertainments there to lure you on in, and then blast you with commercials. That's what they make their money for. And they listen to those advertisers in terms of the content on the show. We saw that out in California when Monsanto threatened to pull advertising from corporate media that supported the GMO labeling initiative. And the corporate media, in absolute goose step, said, oh, this is bad, this is bad. And the measure was reportedly defeated, although there were reports of election fraud on that issue as well. That's what the corporate media does. If you need to know what is going on in the world today, and you do need to know to make good choices, you have to come to the independent media. And that is right here. But we don't have billionaires supporting us, because the billionaires do not want the truth to get out there about what's going on. They want you corralled up and lulled into a false sense of security and safety so that you can be harvested for money and for offspring for more wars. So if you want Republic Broadcasting to be here tomorrow, if you want whatreallyhappened.com to be here tomorrow, we do need your help. There's no glossing it over. We need to replace equipment. We need to pay hosting bills. We need to pay rent, is the reality. Now, if you can donate, even just a little tiny bit, don't wait until you have a huge amount to donate. Just donate what you've got right now. Spare change out of your pocket. Have one less six-pack over the weekend. That's all we're asking. And the postal address to send a donation to Republic Broadcasting is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Road, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number to call on in and pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 outside of business hours. And of course, if you want to donate to whatreallyhappened.com, there's a big beg button right there in the right margin there. All right, so getting on back to the news here. We're talking about the situation in Syria, and apparently Daesh has launched a major new offensive in the direction of Palmyra. And apparently the group is trying to break out of a large pocket in the Badia area, otherwise known as the Syrian Steppe, and it's attacked Syrian army positions east of the T3 pumping station, a major crude oil pumping station located near Palmyra. Now, Daesh militants have reportedly attacked Syrian positions on the Hamama area, formerly Daesh's stronghold on the Syrian steppe. Gee, I wonder where Daesh is getting all these weapons and ammunition to keep mounting all these new offensives. Weird, it's like somebody's just airdropping this stuff out of the sky. Now, I wonder who that could be. Meanwhile, Russia is hinting that ISIS-linked forces are operating in the U.S.-controlled zones in Syria, and apparently there are photos showing U.S. forces protecting the terrorists in Tav. Now, for those of you who've been listening to the show and reading the website for a while, that's not a surprise. We've known all along that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are proxy forces. They're working for the United States. They're working for Israel. When was the last time you saw Al-Qaeda or ISIS, which are supposed to be these Muslim terrorist operations, when was the last time they attacked Israel? They don't. Israel gives them weapons. We're propagandized to think that these are very scary people that we should be afraid of, but they're just used as a stage prop. The U.S. says, oh my goodness, ISIS is over here. We must send in an army. ISIS is over there. We must send in an army. That's how it works. Any nation in the United States wants to take over or regime change, they send in ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Oh, ISIS is in there. War on terror. We've got to send in the military. Say goodbye to your sons and daughters. You may not get them back again. But it's a small price to pay to win the war on terror. The war on terror is a U.S. creation. It's a propaganda tool. Oh, we've got to defeat the war on terror. Not when you find out your own government is behind most of it. Anyway, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And just a reminder that the Front Sight Training Academy promotional deal has been extended through June 2nd, which is the end of this week. This weekend, it all goes away. So you've got the rest of this week, basically 4 days, to take advantage of this. And it is a good deal. If I lived on the mainland anywhere near Nevada, I'd take advantage of this deal myself. Make a heck of a vacation. Drive over to Pahrump and go to the academy and sharpen your shooting skills. Or if you've got somebody, if you don't want it for yourself, or you know somebody who's a shooting enthusiast, Second Amendment enthusiast, got a birthday coming up, pool together. Get 10 of you putting in $50 each, get them the membership. June 2nd is the last day. It will not be extended beyond that. All right, let's take a phone call from Steve in Massachusetts. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I don't know if you discussed this already, but there was a piece on the news the other day about the human Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah.
And it showed a man who came to a rescue of a baby in France.
Yes.
Come on. Did you see that? Did you actually see the video?
Yeah, I saw the video. I mean, he just scaled the outside of that building.
They showed a man holding a 40-pound kid. The mother's just sitting there. He's holding him with one arm. Why doesn't he just reach over and grab him with both arms and the mother help? Nope, this guy comes out of nowhere. And, he's being filmed. He climbs up the building, and all of a sudden he rescues the baby, and he's a hero, and now he's an immigrant, now no longer an immigrant.
Yeah, they gave him a French citizenship. Well, you're right. It could have been staged, by the people who are trying to, sell this open border agenda. And there's been so much negative publicity with all the rapes and everything. You're right. It's not impossible to suggest that this was a staged incident. And if so, you have to look at the people who staged it being willing to risk the safety of that small child.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, he's holding him with one hand. It wasn't for long. And yeah, there's some risk, but it just seemed too convenient that this guy pops out of nowhere. Within seconds, he scales the building. He seems like a professional scaler. And yeah, and all of a sudden, he looks good in France's eyes, saying in the country of France with their problems with illegal immigrants, and they say, see, illegal immigrants are not bad. They can help people. It's just a publicity stunt, in my opinion.
Well, you may very well be right, but it's going to fail, and I'll tell you why. It's going to backflash because it's one guy. And one guy doing something really good is not going to erase the impression made by thousands and thousands of these refugees committing rapes, child sex grooming, other assorted crimes, contagious diseases. In fact, I think most people are going to see this Malian as the exception that proves the rule.
If at all, that's true. Like you said, though, there's been more things that's been going wrong with the illegal immigration than has been right. And, to try to change people's opinions, I think they're one step of trying to do so. I think it's failed. I don't think people are going to buy it.
Well, it was a positive story, and I covered it yesterday out of a sake of fairness to the issue, but it did occur to me at the time that it might be a setup and staged, and you're calling in with that same concern, I think, is kind of reinforcing that. There's a part of me that wants it to be true. You know, I like it anytime you see heroes who are going to save a kid, but you're right. The timing is almost too cute. And we cannot rule out the possibility that this was staged to support the open borders agenda, because Soros is apparently back in there throwing more money into that grand European Union open border agenda.
Yeah, how convenient. Always the bad players always arise from the occasion. All right, Michael, that's all I added to say. I just, wanted to touch base on that, but I don't know. From all the stuff we see on TV now, you can't even decipher what's true and what's not now.
It is very tricky. It is an intellectual jungle out there, and but you do raise a valid point. I can't refute your theory. Anyway, Steve, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. Now, getting on back to the war in Syria. Apparently, the Syrian military has issued what they call the final warning to the militants in southern Syria. They just want to clean out that whole area, get it back under Syrian government control. And the Syrian military has concentrated a force in the province of Daraa to be able to employ a military option should negotiations with local armed groups fail. Reinforcements from the Tiger Forces, the 4th Armored Division, the 5th Armored Division, the National Defense Forces, Liwa al-Quds, and the Syrian Social Nationalist Party have arrived in the area. And according to sources, the Syrian-Russian delegation has sent militants a final warning, providing them with 3 options: to surrender their heavy weaponry and to withdraw to militant-held areas in the provinces of Idlib and Aleppo, to accept a full reconciliation agreement to surrender all weaponry and normalize their legal status, or to face a military operation. So I think this is basically dovetailing with Lavrov's statement that all non-Syrian troops be out of that area. So we'll see what's going to happen over there. Meanwhile, the United States is showing just how childish they can get. And apparently they've announced they will limit their participation in the United Nations Conference on Disarmament because Syria just assumed the presidency over that particular body. And State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert basically said, Syria lacks the credibility to assume the presidency. It will not be business as usual while Syria presides over this body. During the next 4 weeks, we will limit our participation. All right, well, go into a closet with your Play-Doh or your little bubble wrap and try and de-stress a little bit. Is interesting. Apparently, there was what was thought to be a murder of a Russian journalist in Kiev that was, as with the case of the Skripals, immediately blamed on Russia. And it was another Russia bash. Russia denounced it as an obvious anti-Russian provocation. Then it turned out the Russian journalist hadn't died anyway. He showed up alive at a Kiev news conference, and it turned out the whole thing had been staged by Ukraine's National Security Service. And basically, the story from Ukraine is they were trying to entrap somebody who wanted to hit this journalist. But it went all over the TV and all over the media, and oh, it's Russia, it's Russia, it's Russia. Anything bad that happens, Russia's to blame. Got a flat tire? Oh, Russia did that. Too much snow on your roof? Oh, it's Russia's weather weapon. They've got that one. Waxy yellow buildup in the corners of your kitchen floor? That's Vladimir Putin. It really... Yeah, Russia stole our Honda. Vlad, if you're listening to me, you owe me a replacement car. Same thing's going on over with the so-called investigation into Malaysian Airlines Flight 17. And it's a very obvious political hack job. The information provided by Russia has not been used by this so-called International Investigative Committee. The evidence that this committee claims to have has not been shared with Russia, who is being accused of shooting down Flight 17. This investigation does not follow normal investigative procedure or legal process. And it's an inquisition where guilt is simply presumed from the outset, and the prosecution is simply there to bolster out that presumption of guilt. Now, my favorite theory continues to be that Flight 17 was not shot down by a book missile, but was shot down by a Ukrainian warplane, because Vladimir Putin was returning from a 6-day trip to South America. He was flying through the same area over Ukraine, and his presidential aircraft is a converted passenger liner, and the paint scheme is very similar to that of Malaysian Airlines. And we had that one story that came out from an air base in Ukraine of a warplane that departed with missiles on the rails, came back with one missing, and the pilot shaken and saying, "I got the wrong plane, I got the wrong plane." That story came and went, was totally ignored by the corporate media. I think Ukraine wanted to shoot down Vladimir Putin. The pilot hit the wrong aircraft, and everybody just started clamming up. That's my favorite theory about what happened there as well. Okay, so if at first you don't succeed, lie again. Down in Australia, and I have to applaud this movement there. It's a group called the Australian Peacekeepers, and they're having a service and march that will be held on the 2nd of June, which is this coming Saturday. And they have gathered something like 60,000 signatures on a declaration demanding that the Australian government stay out of U.S. wars. They don't want to be any part of it. They don't want to get sucked up in all these wars the United States is starting all over the world, because now that the Middle East is in a total wreck, we see the U.S. starting to push out here in the Pacific, push against North Korea, push against China, push against Russia. Now, as you know, not too long ago, there was this ridiculous lawsuit here in the United States that declared by fiat that Iran was responsible for 9/11, and therefore they had to pay a huge amount of money to the survivors, the families of the victims of the 9/11 attacks. Now, the money is already here in the United States of America. It's part of the Iranian assets that were frozen. Were supposed to have been unfrozen by the P5+1 deal, but never were. And what the strategy is now is to find reasons to just grab that money and keep it in the United States, and this lawsuit is one of them. And Iran is saying that this whole trial is a mockery of international law. First of all, Iran was not allowed to defend themselves in this trial. It was simply a hearing. The judge said, yeah, I think Iran did it. They have to pay this kind of money. The court had no evidence of Iranian involvement in 9/11. The judge just declared what he called a true finding, which is a judge saying, this is what I believe, and it doesn't require proof. We're just going to go on that. So perhaps in retaliation to that, Iran is now considering a lawsuit against the United States for founding ISIS. And the evidence they're citing, along with all of these declassified State Department documents about Libya and Benghazi, was Donald Trump's statements during the campaign about how the United States created, funded, and trained ISIS, which we know they did. Okay, let's take a phone call. Thomas in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.
I wanted to kind of give a heads up. I was listening to some other different, alternative news shows, and something came up about this Tommy Robinson, which I thought was interesting. I've been following for a while this lady. Her name is Alison Chabloz, Chabloz. She's like 54 years old, and she's like a Swiss-English citizen. And apparently she writes music, and she makes fun of basically, Zionism. Okay. She's performed her different songs here and there. And what happened was they basically grabbed her, charged her, and put her on trial. Her trial ended on Friday, the 25th, the same day this guy Tommy was arrested. She basically was convicted. Basically, what she does is she says she does traditional Jewish folk music with lyrics like, did the Holocaust ever happen? Was it just a bunch of lies? Things like that. And she does it in kind of a satirical and comical way.
Okay.
And she got nailed. She got convicted. Her sentencing is sometime in June, I think.
Okay.
And it's the exact same day that this thing happened with Tommy Robinson. And she is literally going to go to jail because it says here, this verdict sends a strong message that a Britain Holocaust denial and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories will not be tolerated. That was from the judge, I think. So that's so much more at the root of the problem than this guy, Tommy Robinson. And the other interesting thing is, apparently, Alex Jones has made quite a big thing about what happened to this guy Robinson.
Yes.
And apparently, he's also sent him some fairly serious money, $12,000 or $20,000 to help him out. And I'm thinking, wow, what a smokescreen, because her conviction is far more important, more towards the root of the problem. And I thought, gosh, are these people that clever that they staged two trials on this same day? And she's completely been eclipsed, and nothing else on the news about what she got convicted of. And it sets a precedent. You go to jail for writing songs, comedic songs about Jewish people.
Well,
kind of interesting.
It wouldn't be the first time that court dates have been rigged to provide cover for something. When Manuel Noriega finally got his day in court over there in Florida, and they were holding the trial for, I think, William Kennedy Smith was his name, was the Victoria's Secret defense, and he was accused of rape. And all the reporters were over there covering that. And so nobody was listening to Noriega when he basically blew the whistle on U.S.-sanctioned drug smuggling through Panama. Anyway, listen, Thomas, you raise a very good point about this lady. We have to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, earlier in the program, we mentioned Vietnam in the context of the U.S. having occasionally suffered military defeats. And it's not like we ever actually won the war in Korea, which actually is our longest running war, because it's officially still on. There's just a ceasefire going on. But it turns out now that the war deaths in Iraq have now exceeded the losses in the Vietnam War. Now, that's being hidden from you with a very subtle change in the rules. The U.S. government has decided that unlike in Vietnam, where all the deaths in the war zone were considered combat deaths, they changed the rules. And the idea is that if you get wounded in battle and you are evacuated, once you're evacuated, you're no longer technically in combat. And if you die then, well, you're put over in another column that nobody talks about. It's like the way they rig the unemployment numbers. But if you evaluate the combat deaths in Iraq under the same rules that applied in Vietnam, then, yeah, we're looking at a lot of people. Story just came into my desk here. This is from politicalvelcraft.org. Apparently, a federal judge has now ruled that a law passed in Kansas designed to punish people who boycott Israel is an unconstitutional denial of free speech. And so the pushback is coming. And that judge may find that he's going to be out of a job real soon because Israel doesn't like it when people support that First Amendment. But apparently we have this victory for free speech rights and the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And somebody may appeal it to the Supreme Court, but I can't imagine the Supreme Court would rule that there is an Israel exception to the First Amendment. That is our most important, most precious right, guaranteed to us by the Bill of Rights. It's not given to us by the government. That's not what the Bill of Rights does. Common Core teaches that the government grants you these rights. That's absolutely not what's going on. The Bill of Rights is the government's acknowledgement of our rights that they may not trespass on. Of course, they've been doing it left and right for decades. Routinely violate the 10th Amendment. They've shredded the 4th and 5th Amendment. Second Amendment's under attack. And now they're trying to carve out an Israel exception for the First Amendment. And if they succeed in doing that, there'll be other exceptions. Can't criticize Israel, can't criticize vaccines, can't question GMOs. You know, when we recognize your right to freedom of speech, we didn't think you were actually going to use it. I mean, come on, people. All right, we're going to take a break here for station identification, and we'll be right back with more news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And getting into the domestic political situation, Maxine Waters is out there. Still just saying some bizarre stuff. Now she's claiming that Trump's use of the term witch hunt to criticize the Mueller witch hunt is a Russian tactic. So in Maxine's mind, the fact that Trump is using that phrase, that's all the proof she needs to prove collusion. Witch hunt is a Russian tactic. No, Maxine, it really isn't. It is amazing some of the stuff that comes out of her mouth there. Anyway, apparently Mueller has announced he is taking a look at Attorney General Jeff Sessions' recusal from the Trump-Russia probe. This is kind of what started this all off when there was questions raised about were the Trump people colluding in some way with Russia. And so Trump just sat back and said, okay, well, the Attorney General will look at it. And Jeff Sessions recused himself, which caused a lot of friction between the Department of Justice and the White House. And people couldn't understand why Jeff Sessions would recuse himself. You know, when that's his, and that's when Rosenstein got Mueller to set up this special counsel, which is kind of a slapdash ad hoc situation because it didn't follow the rules in the special counsel statute. There was no pre-existing Department of Justice investigation on which to base the appointment of a special counsel. Now they're trying to backtrack and say, well, Mueller isn't really a special counsel. He's a continuation of a previously existing investigation. So they're going back and forth and back and forth. Apparently, Grassley has announced a hearing date for the Inspector General report on FBI misconduct. This is going to be Tuesday next week, June 5th. That will be interesting to be tuning into. But according to what's already been leaked out, the Inspector General investigation will hold former FBI Director James Comey and former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe accountable for mishandling a number of elements in the case. And key officials at the center of the findings will be called to testify in front of Grassley's committee with the goal of getting questions about politically motivated bias at the FBI answered in an open forum. In April, the Inspector General released a report exposing McCabe as a serial liar and justified his firing by Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Well, if we know that the investigation into Hillary's email server was mishandled, isn't it time to have a new investigation? I mean, that's what I would be thinking. Wouldn't you think that? We never got a full and proper investigation into that email server. We never got a full and proper investigation into whether there was, in fact, an espionage operation run out of the State Department. I think it's time we got those questions answered. So, story out of Russia today titled Spygate, and it's saying that this whole soap opera of Russiagate is still going on. They're trying to flog this dead horse with absolutely no evidence showing that the Trump campaign colluded with Russia. Meanwhile, we've got all this evidence piling up that the intelligence community, or the deep state, whatever you want to call it, spied on Donald Trump. And they're saying, should there be an investigation into the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the CIA? Are you kidding me? Is that a trick question? Of course there should be. And yes, we know that incumbent presidents will use intelligence agencies to cheat on the elections. Nixon did it. Reagan did it. Or maybe it was Bush that was doing it. Doesn't make it acceptable now. That's not what FBI and CIA are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be out there getting criminals. So yeah, we need full exposure of all of this stuff. We need a full investigation into the email scandal. We need to find out to what extent Imran Awan and his people were involved in espionage inside the Capitol building. We're already way past Watergate, and we, the American people, need to stand up and say, we deserve the truth. Not just we can handle the truth. We deserve the truth. We demand the truth. We demand an end to the lies. We will have a truthful government, or we'll have no government at all. Because going on with a government that lies to us as a matter of everyday business, that is not acceptable any longer. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network, and we're going to go back to the phones. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
No government at all, Mike. That's what it comes down to, because there's no fixing this. There's no repairing this. Whatever we say, whatever we do, they're not listening to us. Look at poor Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders didn't even get, because the nomination was rigged for the Democratic Party.
And then you have Nancy Pelosi coming on out and saying that she sees absolutely nothing wrong with the Democratic National Committee rigging the primaries. She's perfectly okay with that.
That's because she's garbage, Mike.
No, it's because she thinks Democratic voters are idiots. And that she knows better what's best for the party than the Democratic voters. Basically, she was a sellout to Hillary Clinton is what was going on.
Yeah, Mike, you look at this and you're just like, there's nothing like that's going to fix this at this point. Like, I mean, we keep saying we're going to, Trump's going to fix. Trump's not going to fix crap. He's part of his own oligarchy fighting another oligarchy. That's what it comes down. The wall's never going to be built, Mike. We know that now. The wall's never going to be built. The wars are not going to be stopped until they're stopped by somebody else, if you know what I mean. I mean, there's no stopping this what's going on in Washington now, because there's a battle. There's two battles going on, and I don't know what else to say. I mean, this is crazy. You still got Brennan. Who was the NSA director? Trapper?
Yes, I think.
I mean, these people they've been in there for a while. You know, people don't realize these people have been in there for a long, they're the deep state. That's the deep state is the long-term people. You know, like there's no getting rid of these people or their ideology at this point, you know. And then you flip to Europe, it's the same ideology. I mean, poor Tony Robinson, you know, people might not like him, but what they're doing to him is the deep state in Britain.
Yes.
You know, I mean, that's it. You know, like, you might not like him or what he agrees with, you know, like Michael Savage over here 99% of the time. I mean, I don't agree with him 100%. It's not Muslims that's the problem. It's the extremist element of any religion that we arm this country, the Britons or French, you know, that are coming out of Saudi Arabia. But I mean, he's just like part of just the problem or the solution. You know, like I don't see him being a really big part of what's going on. I feel bad for him, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, Mike. I mean,
yes,
I wish people
there
would
is.
like.
You know, there is, and Tommy Robinson, you know, he's not necessarily a good guy, you know, but he's definitely anti-immigrant, and I think that's why he was targeted, because he was live streaming in front of this courthouse where I think these Pakistanis were being tried for running a child grooming ring, which seems to be a big problem right now, and that got the open borders people upset, and they basically shut him down. But we're seeing a crackdown both in Great Britain, all across Europe, and even here in the United States of America. I think people inside government have finally woken up and realized that people everywhere are waking up. They're beginning to see the world for what it really is. They're beginning to understand the machinations of the globalists are not being done for the benefit of ordinary people, but to basically trap us in a permanent state of debt, slavery, and obedience to a global private central bank. People don't want to live that way. And they're starting to share information on the internet and the independent media, and the government is trying to find a way to shut that all down without running afoul of that pesky First Amendment. And I'm very glad that federal judge in Kansas came on out with the ruling that he did, because, yeah, laws saying that you can't boycott anybody are unconstitutional. And we don't always need to wait for a judge to admit that, because of the, Marbury versus Madison decision, which said if the law is repugnant to the Constitution, it's already dead on arrival. And that means that you, the American people, have the right and authority to decide for yourself on the constitutionality of a law. Believe it or not, there is no place in the Constitution that says the United States Supreme Court gets to decide what is or is not constitutional. You're supposed to decide for yourself. That's why you should have a copy of the Constitution and read it and understand it.
Hey, Mike, what does Israel have to do with the United States? Like, what have they done for us? Or Saudi Arabia? Or any of these countries? You know what I mean? Like, as an individual, you know, as me or you, individual, what have they done to make our lives better? Nothing.
No,
right?
Absolutely
Nothing.
not. Well, let's separate Israel and Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia, there has been a great deal of trade, and Saudi Arabia has invested a huge amount of money in the United States in accord with the petrodollar deal. And that's always been a big problem for Israel, because all Israel does is suck money out of the United States. And they're trying to maintain political influence against Saudi Arabia, which has been pouring money into the United States of America. And of course, along with that money comes a certain degree of political clout. And that's one of the reasons why Israel is always trying to sabotage relations between the United States and Saudi Arabia. But as far as Israel is concerned, yes, it's just one constant money suck. And it has been for, you know, Israel's entire history. The American taxpayer has been forced to give Israel something like 10 times the entire cost of the Apollo moon program, and we haven't had an updated version of Velcro to show for all that money. the U.S. is giving, the U.S. government rather, is giving all this money to Israel in defiance of U.S. law, saying that U.S. financial aid may not be given to any nation in possession of nuclear weapons or nuclear weapon technology that refuses to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty or allow IAEA inspections. We know Israel has nuclear weapons. Mordecai Vanunu photographically confirmed that. We know Israel tried to sell a nuclear weapon to the former government of South Africa, and yet the U.S. government, ever obedient to Tel Aviv, just shovels your money at Israel as hard as they can, even though it is illegal under United States law. And I think the American people are really getting pissed off seeing the U.S. government, obviously a puppet to a foreign ruler.
Mike, the only country that's breaking free of Britain and is Iran. Saudi Arabia and Israel, they seem like they're linked to the hip. With either the petrodollar, they're both welfare states, right?
Well, up until that misguided oil price war against Russia, the standard of living in Saudi Arabia was actually pretty good. And despite all of the money being poured all over Israel, the vast majority of the people in Israel, and I'm not talking the Palestinians, I'm talking about the Jewish people, they don't really have a good quality of life because Israel, like the United States, has a major problem with wealth inequality. The people at the very top, they're living just great. The people at the bottom, they're not doing well at all. And the real shame are the people who claim to be survivors of the Nazi slave labor camps from World War II, because Israel runs all these charitable fundraising. We've got to take care of the last survivors of the Holocaust. But time and again, that money never actually reaches those people. And you'll see this or that fundraiser for these Holocaust groups getting carted off to jail. So I think Saudi Arabia takes better care of their people than Israel does.
As long as you can find the king of Saudi Arabia at this point.
Yeah, that is still a question. I know that Riyadh issued a statement in Mohammed bin Salman's name the other day, but he hasn't been seen since that palace coup d'etat. And now you've got other segments of the family talking about staging a coup and changing the throne. And if Crown Prince bin Salman actually is dead, then there is a power vacuum there, because the current King bin Salman, he's not all there. He's got issues, and we may see a major seismic shift to the government of Saudi Arabia in the very, very near future.
And that's pretty scary, Mike, because, the petrodollar, if he's missing or gone underground, petrodollar means everything to this country, right, in terms of, standard of life, right, as we know it.
Well,
pretty much, right?
The petrodollar isn't confined to Saudi Arabia. Petrodollar is a phrase that covers this idea that only the U.S. dollar be used by any oil-producing, oil-exporting nation, whether it's all the OPEC nations originally or Venezuela. That's been a big cause of the friction between the United States and Venezuela, going back to Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez wanted to sell Venezuela's oil to China for the yuan. He didn't see a reason to go through the U.S. dollar and pay that vigorish, as it were. Now, of course, Venezuela is pushing their cryptocurrency, the petro, that's a big threat, because right now, forcing other countries to use the U.S. dollar and collecting interest on that is about all that's left propping up our economy.
All right, thanks, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Rick in Virginia Beach. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
Yes, hello, Mike. Thanks a lot for taking my call. I did have a question. I understand that, Putin, being the statesman that he is, and some of the good things he's doing over in Syria and help repelling some of the bad forces that are trying to overthrow the government there. And I was real curious on, I wanted your opinion on this basically, do you think that Putin is actually somehow avoiding this New World Order takeover that seems to be happening globally with the European Union and what's been happening here between us and Israel and all of this? How is he, or do you think is he actually avoiding this New World Order infiltration?
Well, we know that he's already shut down a lot of these non-governmental organizations that have been identified as agents for the New World Order agenda. So I would say that definitely Putin does not want Russia to be absorbed by a global government. Neither does China. In fact, one of the reasons for increasing tensions between the United States, Russia, and China is that Russia and China are the two biggest obstacles to completion of the New World Order agenda. And the obviously Soros and his other globalists, they're relying on the U.S. military to beat down both Russia and China and get them to accept becoming part of a single global government. And again, that means war with a military peer. And the U.S. is really good at whipping countries that are militarily weak compared to the United States. But going up against a peer, I don't think it's going to go very well. I really don't.
It kind of seems like this Syria thing can blow right up and bring our two countries into direct contact. And where do you think that would go if...
Well, Putin's trying to avoid that. Putin is trying to avoid direct conflict, like he's always been doing. He's trying to keep this under control. He's trying to keep the U.S. from igniting a global war. Anyway, Rick, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, Mirko. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently, Timothy Blixeth claims that he saw proof that Brennan and Clapper were spying on Trump, and Bloomberg, John Roberts, one of the FISA judges, and millions of others long before the campaign. They were just out there spying on everybody. And we know that the attitude of the intelligence agencies, especially the NSA, is we're going to spy on you just in case, even though that's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Clapper, interestingly enough, is out there saying that he doesn't really like the word spy. It's got such a negative connotation. He prefers human intelligence asset. That sort of has a warm and fuzzy, more acceptable feeling. No, Clapper, you were spying on people that you didn't really have a legal reason to spy on. Apparently, an ex-Secret Service agent named Bongino is out there basically saying that, yes, this goes all the way up to Obama himself. And the fact that media outlets are using this Orwellian language like confidential human informant instead of spy doesn't distract from the fact that, yes, Obama knew about these spies and he ordered the covert operations taken against the Trump campaign. So we're into Watergate territory here right now. Over in Arizona, interesting little report here. This is coming from Breitbart. As you know, John McCain is not doing well and is not expected to survive much longer. He's already been forced to step down from his duties in the Congress. And now we're getting this report that his wife, Cindy McCain, will succeed her husband in the Senate. Now, I don't know much about Cindy McCain or what her background is, but I don't think our elected offices should be considered inheritable. And I know a lot of people were joking about George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr. Being a dynasty. But I don't think wives, whether it's Cindy McCain or Michelle Obama, should be having any pretensions of taking over their husband's job at some point. I think it's a bad trend. I think it illustrates that the people who are in those seats really aren't the power in this country any longer. That it is the intelligence agencies, the deep state. They just want to win elections so that they can get their share of the graft and the corruption, their turn at the trough, as it were. Earlier in the week, we reported on this story about how the police accidentally turned over evidence to Imran Awan's defense lawyers rather than the prosecution. And at the time I said, this just doesn't pass the smell test. And now, according to 12160 and quoting Judicial Watch, yeah, evidence has surfaced. This was deliberate. They're protecting Imran Awan. He's accused of basically spying on members of Congress. Now, the question is, was he running a separate operation from Hillary Clinton, or was it all part of one giant operation? And if the prosecutors and the police are protecting Imran Awan, that would suggest the latter. Because everybody's protecting Hillary Clinton, because when Hillary Clinton goes, she'll take everybody else down with her. Okay, so let's take a look at the economic news here. Mortgage rates are rising. They're rising very rapidly. They're rising at a pace not seen in almost a half a century. And looks like they had a good day on the stock market. They recovered their losses from yesterday. Over at the Royal Bank of Scotland, their finance chief has resigned unexpectedly as ministers gear up to sell a £3 billion stake in the bank at a huge loss to the taxpayers. Taxpayers are always made to pay for the incompetence or crimes of the ultra-wealthy. It's the way it works. The poor are made to pay for all. Apparently, over in the European markets, there has been quite a bit of upset. We know that Italy's banks are habitually on the verge of collapse. And George Soros is out there with another Twitter tweet saying, we may be heading for another major financial crisis. Well, George, unfortunately, I think you're right. You cannot sustain a global economy on debt. That is the failing of the private central bank. But then private central banks were not set up to serve the nation and its people. They're private money-making organization. They're legalized counterfeiting operations that just create money out of thin air and then loan it into circulation at interest. And that's why we have to get rid of those. Go back to honest banking. We'll be back after these few words from our sponsor. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm watching the Fox News feed here. We're really living in a Twilight Zone episode. Apparently, Kim Kardashian is now at the White House meeting with President Trump and Jared Kushner to discuss prison reform. Kim Kardashian, prison reform. Sorry, I don't see the connection. It's a PR stunt. Ooh, I get to go to the White House. I get to show off my latest dress. It really is a joke. Now, there is another story, as long as we're talking about prison reform. Apparently down in Tennessee, there was a prisoner in their prison system, had been there for 21 years, was originally sentenced to something like 30. I just saw the story in passing. And he was released early. And now the state government is saying that, well, we made a mistake. Your sentence was reduced due to an error, and you have to come back to prison and let us lock you back up. And there are already calls for Trump to pardon this man, give him a pardon, which Trump can do if he was convicted in a federal court. But if he was convicted in a state court, Trump can't touch him. And in this case, I would say, yeah, I mean, yes, you made a mistake, but the guy's been in prison for 21 years. And unless you really think he's still a threat to the community, I would roll with the mistake. Because he's already out. He's already trying to reestablish himself. So maybe if he was convicted in the state court, the state governor will intervene. Because to me, releasing him, saying, you're free, you have paid your debt to society, you're free to go, and then saying, oops, sorry, made you look, you have to come back. To me, that crosses the line into cruel and unusual punishment, which, as you know, is forbidden by the Constitution here. Getting on back to Europe, there's been a study done by a very left-leaning think tank, not right-leaning, but left-leaning, liberal. And even they are admitting that most Brits believe that this open borders policy has harmed communities. They fear the nation's culture and traditions are being lost. Well, yeah. When you flood this alien population in without any control, and they come on in there demanding that everybody adjust to the society they just left, yeah, it is diluting that culture. It is diluting that cultural identity. That's what it's designed to do. Part of the aims of the globalists and the New World Order is to get us all confused about who we're supposed to be, to erase our regional cultural history, to get us so confused up we're not even sure what bathrooms we're supposed to use. And the British people are fighting back, and that may be the reason why Tommy Robinson was treated so badly, because he was out there live streaming this case where these Pakistani child grooming gangs were being tried at the court. And Tommy is anti-immigration, but that's not a crime. Now, Soros has announced he's going to fund a new Brexit referendum campaign. This appears to be the new model for democracy around the world. We're going to keep having elections until I get the result that I want. And this basically amounts to America meddling in British democracy. Because Soros, although Hungarian by birth and an admitted Nazi collaborator, he's now a U.S. citizen. He lives in the United States and just runs around the world making trouble for everybody here. But what he's now campaigning for is calling for a new referendum on the Brexit. Forget the last one. We didn't like that result. It was too close. We demand a new referendum. And this time we're going to cheat twice as hard. Story coming out of Russia today. The expectation is that Theresa May will not be at Downing Street by this time next year, and may even leave sooner than that if Brexit is derailed in the forthcoming crunch parliamentary votes. A lot of people are very unhappy with Theresa May. She was voted in supposedly to get Brexit going, and instead she's allowed delays. She has conceded huge amounts of money and authority to Brussels, and from all appearances, seems to have been co-opted by the Remainers. And she's become very, very unpopular because of that. The Brits want a hard Brexit. They don't want all this long, drawn-out negotiation. The original European Union agreement gives them the right to simply say, we want out of the Union. Brussels obviously wants to derail that. Soros wants to derail that. All of these unions are the stepping stones toward a single global government. They're trying to find some way to stop it. They could trigger a civil war, not just in Great Britain, but other parts of the European Union. Now, over in Italy, as you know, they recently had elections, and the two Eurosceptic parties basically got the majority of the votes, and they announced they were going to form a coalition government. Unfortunately, that has been blocked by Italy's president, saying, I'm not going to authorize a coalition government with you people in it. And so now you have Washington, D.C., and NATO and Brussels all coming into Italy saying, well, maybe you should have some new elections. Or maybe you should declare these two Eurosceptic parties illegal. That's also a growing trend around the world, to declare certain political parties illegal for espousing ideas that the globalists don't like. But apparently they're heading for a clash over financial policy, the populist challenge to the European Union, economic austerity, immigration, and open borders. So you could actually, it's very, very stressed. And again, Italy is yet more proof that Brussels only believes in democracy when it produces the results Brussels likes. When the Eurosceptic parties are winning, oh, there's a problem. There's got to be a problem. We've got to do something about that. People of Europe are waking up and realizing they have been royally had. The European Union was sold to them as just about free trade and free travel. That was it. Now we know, because of documents that were leaked in Great Britain, that it was always intended that the ultimate goal of the European Union was to destroy the sovereignty of the member states and create a single federalized nation. And they were hoping that they were going to get it established before people figured out what was going on. I think they may be a little bit off the timing on that. So anyway, getting on back to Italy, the anti-EU League and the Five-Star Coalition, if there is another election forced, because the president won't authorize the coalition government, these two parties are already talking about merging and creating a single party. And if they won in a new election, there's a darn thing the president of Italy could do about it. So this is really heating up. People don't want to be part of these unions. The larger these economic empires get, the worse it is for ordinary people. We're seeing that all across Europe. We're seeing it here in the United States of America. We need to get our countries, our states, back from the money junkies. The United States started as a collection of sovereign, independent states. And the federal government existed only to arbitrate disputes between the states and to serve the collective defense in time of war. They weren't supposed to do anything else. That's why that 10th Amendment was in that Bill of Rights. But you know, people in politics, they want more power, more authority. I mean, some of the stuff the European Union has handed down to the member states, I mean, they literally, in the grocery stores, they have size requirements for the produce. Cucumbers have to be between this and that size. If they're too small or too large, got to chop them up for salad or throw them away. I mean, just nitpicky little things. But when you have power-mad people in government, that's what they do. They just look for more and more things that they can exert authority over. How big the produce is in the supermarket. How much shag on your carpet. And bit by bit, it becomes more oppressive. More 1984. Apparently, up in Belgium, there was an attack by a refugee shouting "Aloha snack bar," or whatever it is they shout. He killed 2 female police officers and 1 bystander. Apparently started the attack with a knife, stabbed one of the police officers, took the police officer's weapon, and then used their weapons in a shooting rampage. And the police chief in Liège, Belgium, has said this might be a terror attack. Yeah. Good suspicion, I think, there. Okay. Over in France, they have a prison, Fleury-Mérogis, which holds 20 female jihadi inmates and is notorious for Islamic radicalization. And apparently, they're in serious trouble. The staff is struggling with violence, exhaustion, staff suicides. Conditions there are really bad. And apparently, this prison has a total of 290 female inmates, 20 of whom have been tagged as Islamic terrorists. And they're trying to recruit from the other women. There's a lot of violence. These 20 women are always supposed to be accompanied by guards wherever they go. They don't have enough guards to do that. So tell us again about how this open borders thing is really making Europe a better place to live. Now, I remember Europe. Back in the 80s, I got to travel and work in Europe, in the Lombard region of Italy, in Rome. Munich, and London. And I have very fond memories and a lot of pictures of that time. But I'm looking at photos of Europe today. And that Europe that I experienced, it's already going away because of all the damage caused by the open border situation. The crime, the vandalism, it's a huge vandalism problem. Churches are being vandalized. Nobody's reporting on it, but it's happening. Okay, now as you know, over in Hungary, Viktor Orban is trying to basically say, Hungary will decide for itself who comes over our borders. And needless to say, he's being attacked constantly by the globalists. And interestingly enough, Manfred Weber, who's the leader of the largest political group in the EU Parliament and an ally of Angela Merkel, is saying Viktor Orban isn't a bad European. He's trying to fight illegal immigration. So even the political governing body of the European Union is starting to pull back from this open borders issue. They are realizing it is not popular with the people. They're seeing what it's doing to Europe. And the big problem is going to be how to get these refugees back to where they came from. Well, step one is end all these wars. Step two is shut down all these NGOs promising them incentives to relocate. And step three, somebody's going to have to pay for these people to make the trip back home again. Story out of Sputnik News talking about the growing Eurosceptics pressure. And it's saying it's actually starting to erode Brussels' subservience to the United States. And the article says Washington is ready to solve its economic dilemmas at the expense of others, even if they are long-standing U.S. loyal allies. Yes, we've been seeing that with all these sanctions and tariffs that are actually harming our European allies. So you're starting to see Europe strain at that leash, both on the economic and the immigration issues. The United States really is a failing power at this point. They're losing influence. And I think that's why they're out there thumping on their chest and just trying to bully everybody into doing what the U.S. government wants. Now, as I mentioned before, George Soros, during World War II, collaborated with the Nazis. He helped them track down other Jews, for which Soros was richly rewarded. And that was the very beginning of his fortune, before the days when he broke the Bank of England. And now, of course, Soros is trying to say, no, it never happened. But he did admit it in a TV interview. And we have that video clip on the front of whatreallyhappened.com. So this is not a nice man. But he's got huge amounts of money, and he just feels that having that kind of money gives him a special authority to play around with planet Earth and all of its people as if they are his personal toy. And I tend to disagree. I'm sure it's nice having a lot of money. I wouldn't know personally, but it doesn't give you the right to mess around with other people's lives. The only way that you have a right to have any control or influence over other people's lives is if you are elected to a leadership position. And one of the big problems that has gone wrong with this country, especially since limits on campaign contributions were removed, is you have ultra-rich people like George Soros or Sheldon Adelson who are simply buying the power structure to serve their own agendas. And that's not what the United States is supposed to be like. We're supposed to be a republic with a democratically elected government serving the will of the American people. And we've gone a long way from that. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, interestingly enough, as you know, over in Great Britain, they've got a major problem with violence. They've banned guns. Now there's a lot of stabbings going on, to the point where they're now talking about having blunt-tipped kitchen knives to try and get that under control, which is ridiculous. It doesn't take all that much time to put a sharp tip back on a knife. And everybody's saying, you know, what's going on? Why are we having to deal with all of this? Well, the obvious answer is when you've got open borders and you've got people coming in who are not being vetted, you're going to get a certain percentage of people with a disposition prone to violence and crime. But the British government doesn't want to admit that the open borders are a problem. No, 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 we can't. That would be racist. So now Great Britain is blaming the rising crime rates on music videos. I'm not kidding. This did not come out of The Onion. So YouTube has now obligingly deleted 30 violent music videos. Now, I'm not a big fan of music videos. I haven't been for quite some time. And I know some of them can get really very violent. But the idea that watching a violent music video or computer game or TV or movie is going to force somebody to go out and be violent, that's a bit of a stretch. I understand that a lot of this stuff desensitizes people. I got to run a malware thing on it. The situation with Roseanne Barr is spiraling out of control. And now she's trying to say that the reason that she tweeted what she tweeted is because she's on Ambien, which is a medication that can produce some side effects. But Ambien's manufacturer is saying racism is not a known side effect. So now Ambien's manufacturer and Roseanne Barr are now back in a Twitter war. Roseanne said she was quitting Twitter. She's already back on it. Apparently, a lot of her co-stars and production people on her show are having a Twitter war. They're very upset. They weren't expecting to lose their jobs this soon. Meanwhile, there's a lot of people out there saying it does seem like there is a double standard being applied here. We're going to be right back after a station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about this cancellation of Roseanne Barr's TV show. Now, I never watched the show myself, either originally or in its recent incarnation. I do understand she's conservative, and the show catered to a conservative point of view, which may have been why it was in the crosshairs. Because more and more people are stepping up and saying, there does appear to be a double standard here. That when you're a liberal person, you can say or do whatever you want, and nothing will happen. But conservatives are held to these insane standards. Now, I don't agree with what Roseanne Barr tweeted. I think she crossed a line there, but I don't think she should have lost her show. But you've got like people like Jimmy Kimmel ran that racist skit. He goes out and he has women, young women, basically fondle his junk for on air for laughs. They go out there with a camera and he just invites women to grab his crotch. Apparently, a lot of women are willing to go along with that here. And then there was the time Bill Maher comparing Trump to an orangutan. Nothing happened to him. So the message is kind of clear. If you're a liberal, you know, everything and everybody's fair game. It's only if you're a conservative, oh, you got to be careful what you say. It's more bias here. All right, let's take a phone call from Don in Iowa. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike, on this double standard, no doubt about that. I remember when Trump first got elected, and Madonna, of course, she's a rock, I guess, or a pop star, and maybe they will give her more leniency compared to a TV star like Roseanne. But she said she wanted to blow up the White House. They had these rallies that were basically Trump denial rallies. We don't. He's not our president, and this
I remember
kind of thing.
those. I remember those.
Yeah, she was trying to incite a riot. Is what she was trying to do. She said, "I would like to go blow up the White House." And I don't know if it happened or not, but the FBI should have been visiting her the next day and interviewed her.
Well, certainly the Secret Service protective detail should have gotten involved, because it is, in fact, a federal crime merely to threaten the life of the president. And I imagine that probably extends to the vice president and members of Congress as well. But there was a lot of that going on, where you had these liberal stars out there, these Hillary crybabies, and they were out there saying, I just want to kill him, I want to do this, I want to do that. And finally, the Secret Service did start paying visits to these people, who were out there saying, well, I have a right to freedom of speech, and I have a right to threaten. And actually, no, in this particular case, there is a law saying that, you're not allowed to threaten the life of the president. Your First Amendment right is that you can disagree with him publicly, and you can criticize the president for his actions, supposedly without fear of reprisal. Okay, but crossing the line into threats of violence, that's not what the First Amendment was intended for.
Really, you're not. I think it's against law to threaten the life of anybody, to plan a murder or to incite a riot, but especially the President of the United States. I mean,
well, I know there is a law specific to the President of the United States. I don't know if there's actually a law that would make it a crime if you were to, just threaten my life. Maybe somebody's familiar with the letter of the law on that one. But I know it's a specific law specific to the president.
Well, Roseanne, she's a comedian. David Knight did a good segment on that this morning. Basically, comedians always jab people, like Don Rickles. Everything he said was a jab. Was an obnoxious jab. That was his whole shtick.
Yeah, it was.
In fact, every comedian,
it was.
Every comedian, he got by with it for years. Every comedian. I mean, she called her. What did she say? Something like a cross between a water buffalo and something else.
I think it was a cross between the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes. I think was exactly what she put on out.
Okay.
But it is rather interesting.
It's funny.
If you study the history,
funny whether or not you like Valerie Jarrett, but she came out later and said that she didn't know she's black. She didn't know Valerie Jarrett was black. She doesn't really look black.
But as I was about to say, if you study the history of comedy, and you go back and you look at the major comedians of the 50s and 60s, and even into the start of the 70s, they were saying things that they would be absolutely crucified for today. That's what political correctness has done. And as a result, shows that used to be genuinely funny, like Saturday Night Live, these days they're nothing but liberal scream fests, and that's all they are. And they're really not funny. They're not creative anymore because of political correctness.
Political correctness is horrible. And one thing that Trump said when he was campaigning, he says, he actually made a short statement, about 5 words. He said, "I am not politically correct," and he got that on the and that alone is enough to vote for him. Even though he's been a disappointment and he kowtows to Israel and all that.
Yeah. There's no question. I mean, he said all the right things during the campaign. And again, I've made it very clear, my support for Trump was primarily about keeping Hillary out of that Oval Office. And if Bernie Sanders had won that primary, I probably would have supported him. But
he would have been president. He would have won. He would have won the election.
Yeah, I think he would have. If he hadn't been cheated out of it, I think he would have won it, and at least he's going to get back into the Senate here. But Trump is a disappointment. There's no two ways about it. And he's not dealing with the political correctness issue. He's not dealing with the vaccines. He's not dealing with election fraud. I agree with Dustin in New Jersey. That wall isn't really being built. Not that we ever really needed one. We just have to enforce the Title VIII laws that we have. Eisenhower shut down the illegal immigrant problem with only 10% of the resources that Trump has. If Eisenhower could do it, Trump can do it. But what Trump has to do is keep his most important promise to we the American people. He's got to start draining that swamp, not open the door and hire in the alligators and the water moccasins to key staff positions.
I think he's trying to get Jeff Sessions he's trying to invite him to turn in his resignation. It seems like he keeps saying stuff. He won't fire him, but he keeps saying stuff about how Sessions which is obvious. I mean, Sessions sucks, and he should be gone. And then if they had a better attorney general, maybe some of this stuff would happen. Okay, I'll let you go, Mike. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network. And I hate to belabor the obvious, but Donald Trump does have the authority to fire Jeff Sessions at any time. All of these top government officials understand they serve at the pleasure of the President of the United States of America. And Trump is showing himself to be very weak, too susceptible to flattery. He needs to toughen up. He needs to get out those presidential brass knuckles. And he needs to go on out there, and anybody who's not doing the job they're supposed to be needs to be gone. So let's get Larry Klayman in there as Attorney General or as a special prosecutor. Trump seems to be living under this illusion that the only people qualified to work for the government are inside that beltway in Washington, D.C. And that's absolutely not true. There are talented, educated, knowledgeable, skilled people throughout this entire country from sea to shining sea. And it would be better to replace the people inside the beltway with people from outside the beltway, because the people outside the beltway do not have those compromising connections. All right, let's take another phone call. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Al, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Are you there, Mike?
Yes, you're on the air. What's on your mind today?
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I didn't really want to talk about Trump, but you were talking a little bit about political correctness earlier.
Yes.
I don't know what happened, but the video froze, so I had to refresh, and then all of a sudden, like I was just before when Dustin came on, so I kind of missed what was going on. But I was wondering, did you mention anything about what happened with Roseanne Barr and her silly comments on Twitter and all that jazz?
Yeah, we did about 8 minutes on it, I think.
Oh, okay, because oh my goodness, how could she do such a silly thing, Mike? And once again, she's blaming. The blame is going to be put on drugs, which I can believe that. But right away, the manufacturer of that drug is coming back and saying there's no way. So basically, she's being smeared. Over this political correctness over something that like back in the Archie Bunker days. I mean,
I think her show was targeted.
They would nail that guy
it had very good ratings. It had just had the relaunch. It was getting very good ratings. People were tuning on into it. And I think the liberal establishment in Hollywood just said, this has got to go. We can't have this here. People are actually watching a show that basically appeals to the Trump audience. And I think they were just looking for an excuse, and Roseanne gave it to them.
It was just basic common sense, right? And it's really funny how they were actually, the show was making fun of liberalism to a certain extent, but how can you not? Like some of the stuff is just outlandishly crazy.
I agree.
But but at the same time, it shows acceptance. The different diversity of the newer characters. So there's a lot of that, and we're basically, Roseanne and even oh geez, I can't think of his name. Anyways, it's John Goodman's character. Says they kind of turn around in what they think and believe. So and that would scare a liberal too.
Yes.
Even though you believe in certain things that you don't just feed someone. you know, that they have to work. You have to grow as a human being. You have to put forth effort. I mean, complacency is idle hands are the devil's playground, like, right?
Yeah, absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
no.
I think when Roseanne was relaunched, I think Hollywood probably assumed it would have a fringe audience because, after all, everybody loves the liberals. And when the show's popularity took off, I think that's when they decided they had to find some way to derail it. And I don't agree with what Roseanne Barr tweeted, but ABC definitely was under pressure to get rid of that show and not give conservatives a focal point going into the midterm elections.
Yeah, I thought that right after Trump tweeted, you know, he liked the show. I knew it was on the chopping block.
Yep.
But, you know, I'm hoping it'll get picked back up. And as far as, you know, Roseanne Barr's comments, I mean, she's always been kind of, you know, out there. And, you know, some of the stuff she is doing is a little, like, you know, I mean, how do you say this, Mike? I mean, it is kind of offensive, you know, and I'll shake my head, but I mean, it doesn't mean that, you know, I have the right to stop her from doing that. No one does. I mean, really. But, you know, I mean, the social morals and mores, I mean, come into a play here. So it isn't so much a left-right thing. It's just, you know, that's
well,
kind of
you know, let's get down to the basics here. Because of that First Amendment, Roseanne has a right to say what she said. Okay, I personally choose to refrain from personal attacks on other people unless I'm really provoked. Roseanne's style is somewhat different. I don't think she should have lost her show for that. I think her tweet was just an excuse to get rid of a show that was galvanizing conservative politics in this country. And I'm looking at another article here saying, you know, Roseanne was canceled. Why not The View? And I got to tell you, I get emails all the time about what the stuff that's being said on The View. Apparently, Joy Behar has been mocking Mike Pence for talking with Jesus, saying that's called mental illness. And apparently, just going on with all kinds of stuff. So a lot of people are out there saying the Roseanne story has illustrated that there is a double standard, that liberals are allowed to just say whatever they want, no matter how offensive and shocking, and conservatives are still being targeted inside the media, and that is definitely real. I remember how fast my career evaporated back in the days of Vince Foster. Anyway, we're going to let you go here, and we've got a bunch of callers now, Mike. And we're going to switch over to Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, there's a lot of Trump supporter money out there. What a good business investment it would be to fund the production of Roseanne by a bunch of Trump supporters, just purely for a for-profit business venture. Nobody likes censorship, so all the Trump supporters don't like censorship. Even I would watch the show, even I had no interest in it before, because it's interesting that it was censored and then brought back to life by the same group that was being censored. But, okay, so next topic.
Well, before you go on to the next topic, there's more to the process of getting a TV show out there than funding its production, because you have to have distribution. Now, I think back to some of the early adventures. There's this animated science fiction cartoon that was originally on Fox. I'm blanking on the name of it. And then they got booted off and they found another network. I would not be surprised, given the show's popularity, Roseanne's popularity, to see somebody like Amazon Prime or Netflix or Hulu pick it up, because I think they're probably much more interested in profitability than they are in pushing the liberal agenda. And ABC, they're going to take a financial hit for this. There are already calls for people to just boycott ABC completely over this.
Yeah, censorship is becoming less and less popular than ever.
Censorship never really was popular, except for authoritarians.
Exactly. So hey, as an amateur inventor, I made a promise to myself I would never contribute towards the military. This I'll make an exception because this will not increase the deadliness of a Tomahawk missile. In fact, it could decrease proliferation. So remember that story about the Tomahawk getting soft landed by the Russians or somebody in Syria?
Yes.
And then now it's being analyzed?
Yep.
Okay. Talk about a no-brainer, obvious solution to this. Okay, so just before you launch, you activate a mechanical spring coil egg timer that is set for longer than the possible duration of the existence of this missile.
Yes.
So, if you anticipate the maximum lifespan after the moment of launch being like 1 minute, well, then you set it for 2 minutes. Okay. And then there's no electronics in it. There's no Wi-Fi. It's not electronic, 100% mechanical. It's a spring coil that you set to say 2 minutes. Then it just pulls a mechanical trigger of a mechanical gun and fires a mechanical bullet into the heart of the explosive. So, I mean, there's no excuse for ever having a captured missile.
Well,
you could just
you're ignoring the weight problem. You're ignoring the fact that all of this you're describing is going to add weight to the Tomahawk and decrease its range and possibly its speed as well. Anything that is up in the air, whether it's a Tomahawk cruise missile or a Cessna or a 747 or a dirigible, they're always thinking in terms of weight versus, distance and speed. And all these are engineered to be as light as possible, and they don't like to just add gratuitous weight to it. That's something that the military-industrial complex will do to increase the price of their products, and some of them get really silly. But in general, you don't want to add that kind of weight. And on the assumption that the Tomahawk is going to destroy itself anyway when it hits its target, then it would seem like this kind of a thing would be superfluous. What I think happened is that somebody was able to spoof this Tomahawk into that soft landing, because Tomahawks aren't designed or programmed to have soft landings. They're designed to basically crash into their target, and if they run out of fuel, they just crash into the ground. So anyway, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we get back to the phones here, apparently Senator Feinstein, trying to get ahead of the impending release of the Inspector General's report and testimony before Congress, is now out there saying that she is releasing a report of her preliminary findings, proving that, yes, indeed, the Trump campaign and Russia colluded to try and find dirt on Hillary Clinton. Now, technically, that's not illegal. There actually is no such thing as a crime of collusion under U.S. law. And everybody was trying to find dirt on everybody. But Feinstein is still out there trying to shift the dialogue back onto Donald Trump. It's amazing how shameless these people are. All right, back to the phone lines now. Mark in Florida. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for letting me in, Mike.
Okay, what's on your mind today?
You got me?
Yeah, I got you. You're on the air.
He was mentioning that Trump should bring in people outside the Beltway.
Yes.
I would nominate a gentleman named Rodney Dale Class. He's been a guest on John's show.
Okay.
Rodney Dale Class went to D.C. to have his congressman sign some paperwork for him, and he had his guns in his truck, and he was arrested. And he fought them in court. And what the federal courts did to him was put an ankle bracelet on him and told him he's not allowed inside Washington, D.C. without a federal marshal escort when they summons him to appear in Washington, D.C. So he was barred from entering Washington, D.C. And he also fought his conviction because they forced him into a plea agreement and won in the Supreme Court, claiming that they had to let him appeal his conviction. They was trying to say he couldn't appeal his conviction, and he appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, yes, you can.
Okay.
So a person like that, and basically he was pointing out all the wrongs, the prosecutors, the police, the judges, everybody that was attacking him, he pointed out all the wrongs they were doing. With a man like that in there, he would have every he could point out every wrong from every congressman and how they're breaking their own laws or ignoring their own laws, and he'd be one guy to help Trump clean the swamp.
Well, he certainly sounds like he's an American who understands the concept of fighting to hang on to our rights here. Is he, by trade or profession rather, is he a lawyer himself?
He is a man knowledged in the law. He's not a licensed attorney.
Okay.
Shyster.
All right. Well, where would you like to see him put?
Attorney General. Who else? These people, Hillary Clinton can only be brought into court if an attorney general or something like that files a claim against them. As long as they don't, if I robbed a bank and no prosecutor filed a claim against me, I'm free to rob banks, and that's what they're doing. They're not filing claims on them. That's why they're not. That's
a good analogy. In fact, I just got an email from somebody who's listening to the show over their computer and saying, why have we not seen any prosecutions for the way the DNC stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders? It's just not happening. There's that civil litigation that's going on. But again, we're seeing the deep state not allow their people to be prosecuted. There really is a class of untouchables in this country, illustrated by the Clintons. There is so much evidence of Uranium One, skullduggery. There's so much evidence of corruption involving the Clinton Foundation. Congress is finally getting around to say that, there were deficiencies in the investigation of the email server, but they won't reopen the investigation into the email server.
Well, the thing is, if you or me gave them 1,000 pages of facts and evidence proving that they committed a crime, it means nothing until the prosecutor files a claim. And that's what it is. They won't arrest themselves.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's not the way this is supposed to work. One of the reasons that the Founding Fathers set up the 3 branches of government was so that those branches did have the authority to go on in and slap down the other branches when they weren't behaving very well. But our system has become totally corrupt. All the real power is concentrated in way too few hands at the very top. It's sickening to see the country headed in this direction. And I agree with that other caller who called in earlier today. At this point, it's irrecoverable. We're just going to have to let it implode. We're just going to have to let it implode on itself and be prepared to take back control of our country in the aftermath and not let some carpetbaggers come on in here and try and restart the same scams all over again. As far as I consider it, anybody who walks on into the new United States and says, we need a private central bank, boy, is there a candidate for tar and feathers. Anyway, Mark, I got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right back to the phones. Teresa in Tennessee. Aloha, Teresa. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Oh, aloha, Michael. I'm so tickled. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. My burning question, I've heard you mention several times that you've lost 100 pounds, and I'm just curious to know how you achieved that.
Well, it was intentional, obviously, for health reasons primarily, and it took me 2 years to do. You should never lose weight very, very quickly. All I really did is I researched chemicals that are added to food by food manufacturers that interfere with your brain's I am full signal. And manufacturers love to put these chemicals into the food because then you will eat more. You will buy more, they make more money, and it's a big reason why we have this obesity epidemic in the United States of America. We are being fed food that makes us want to eat more. And the 2 chief villains that I got out of my diet is monosodium glutamate, which is sold as a flavor enhancer, but the reality is it interferes with that signal from your gut to your brain saying, I've had enough to eat. And the other one is aspartame, which is supposed to be an artificial sweetener. That one also interferes with the brain signal, I've had enough to eat. In fact, when scientists want to do obesity studies using rats, they'll have to dose the rats' food with tons of monosodium glutamate, MSG. Otherwise, the rats will stop eating. Rats left to themselves don't get overweight. So they had to drug them with MSG to get them fat in order to run their studies. And that was basically it. I also avoided meat and poultry that was hormone treated because they're given these growth hormones. And any of these hormones that are not fully metabolized by the time the animal is harvested, you're going to eat that, and it's going to affect your body the same way that it would affect the cattle or the chicken. And that was basically it. You know, the weight just came on off, and it's staying off. But that was all it is. Just
great.
Be natural, organic in your food, and stay away from all these additives.
Eat more whole foods. Eat more whole foods.
Yeah.
Do you eat more whole foods?
I eat more.
You know, like fresh.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of fresh food here on the islands. We have a lot of farmers markets. And yeah, just basically stuff that is not processed. And even then, you have to be very, very careful because at the supermarkets, you know, you'll look at the produce section and it looks like it's all this farm fresh stuff. They still spray it with glyphosate because glyphosate is a preservative. And while glyphosate is not going to have an impact on your weight, it's still something that you should avoid. And so Claire and I, we hit that non-GMO certified section. We have a Down to Earth, which is moving to a larger building very, very soon, which I think illustrates the trend. People are just getting away from this corporatized food. A lot of people are very upset that Whole Foods, ever since they've been taken over from Amazon, is now dropping their non-GMO policy. So they're just going to rest on the brand name where people are going to be led to believe that they're eating healthier food by going to Whole Foods, but no, it's going to be the same GMO stuff you're getting at your local supermarket.
Yeah, we have to really know what we are eating, yes.
Absolutely.
Can I say hey to Frances in North Carolina?
You sure can, because she's our next caller.
Is she really?
Yes.
Well, she's just on the other side of the Smoky Mountains from me.
Okay.
And it's always a hoot when she calls. But thank you for the help on the diet. I'll do better. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, but it's, you know, slow and easy. You know, only weigh yourself once a week. Don't ride that scale every single day because there's going to be fluctuations and you're going to frustrate yourself. But like I said, it took me 2 years, and you know, I'm obviously doing a lot better without all that extra weight here. So thank you very much for the phone call. And now we're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. I just got done talking with your fan club. What's on your mind today?
I was about to say hello, aloha, and all that kind of good stuff to you both, but now I am floored. I am totally floored. Back at you is the only thing I can tell you, my dear. I hope you didn't get flooded from the rain that came from that tropical depression or whatever. Oh my gosh, of all the things. But anyway, it took me a bit to try to remember everything that was had been crossing my train of thought here. One, the fact that you mentioned about that the puppet in charge. Well, that's not your words, mine in particular.
Yep.
That they have the ability to fire whomever, whatever. Reminded me of the aspect of two films. One was Day with Kevin Kline.
Yeah.
And but I don't think he really fired anybody. But go figure, they wanted to kill him. And secondly was the first independence film. I think it was not Bill Paxton that was the president in that film, but he basically told the one cabinet person that was in charge of black projects or whatever have you, that kept various information in front of the president, all that stuff. He said, "Well, guess what? You're fired." And he looked at this other gal that was there and said, "He can't do that." And she said, "Yes, he can." I thought, oh man, if we had a president like that, this nation would be cooking.
Yeah.
But that's what I remember that scenario. Now, as for secondly, you said about the organic foods and non-organic and
Well,
whatever.
before we go on to the organic food, one of the ideas I have for the blueprint for the new America is we get rid of this ridiculous aspect of having a president in his first term campaigning for the second term. Let's just say if you win the election, you're president for 8 years, and you don't bother going through a re-election, and that way, and you can't run again. And so you're going to have a president who's in the Oval Office who doesn't need anything from anybody anymore. He doesn't need a Sheldon Adelson's money. He doesn't need George Soros. And that would be a way of insulating members of Congress from these outside, or the White House from outside influence. In fact, we should make it single term only for members of Congress, because so many of them seem to be getting in there long past their prime, like Dianne Feinstein and Maxine Waters. When the Founding Fathers set up this country, being in the government was a part-time honor only. It wasn't supposed to be a permanent career. Everybody who set up the United States, even as they served as early legislators, they still had their jobs. Thomas Jefferson was a lawyer. Paul Revere was a silversmith. Ben Franklin was a publisher. And on and on and on. And they only met infrequently to deal with the nation's business. And it was never intended to be this full-time, a multi-generational inherited office.
True. However, I have to agree and disagree with your assessment. Reason being, there are already corporate heads that are up in D.C., so they're already versed about what the ins and outs and all that is going on for criminals. So if anything, I would agree with the aspect of it being a 4-year term without a midterm election process to say, we did this, and this is what we got to look forward to, and blah, 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 blah. No, 8 years is overkill. We already had that with the Shrub Jr. and so forth back during his period of time after Clinton and his daddy and all that kind of good stuff. So enough of that.
Okay.
We don't need an 8-year term to deal with that scenario. Right. So much for that one.
Point taken.
But as for very good. As for the organic scenario, there is one thing I come to discover. You may be able to look it up online, on YouTube or whatever, but they actually do, without having to go through getting an application of sorts put on your iToy or whatever you want to call it, that tells you which is organic, which is not, blah, blah, blah. There's something about the number code that you look on that's actually printed on the food item.
Yes.
Two of the three I recall, but the third one I'm trying to remember and is elusive to me. One has, I think, 4 has to do with something about being chemically treated or not being chemically treated. However, 9 is supposed to indicate that the item is organic, which is supposedly non-GMO. But there's a lot more clarification needs to be on that because they have the sticker of the vegetable or fruit item in order for the person to actually know. But if someone were to actually do a lookup of that, it's quite fascinating what you discover without having to really take something with you to the store to actually do a search for that. So I've actually found that rather helpful on my end. So, that's just me, though.
Well, ultimately these systems will stand or fail based on the integrity of the people putting those labels out there. And one of the things that we've discovered is that the U.S. government, the FDA's certified organic program has already been eroded by industry lobbyists. And whereas originally the program was, this is certified organic, all organic, now they can get the sticker if there is below a certain percentage of non-organic components. So the label has been morphed away from being something that is genuinely informative to the consumer to something that is used as a sales tool.
Well, true. That's the reason why I don't tend to rely on USDA as far as marked organic, because to me that's a fraud to start with. Now, if it was back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, I would agree with it. But at the same time, are you joking? If anything, I tend to reflect on whether or not it's been marked as QAI, which is called Quality Assurance International, or let alone certified official, whatever it is. So certified organic stamping or whatever as far as the print goes to carry that labeling. So those I'll go by more than I'll used to go by USDA because they're bought and paid for, period. I mean,
yes.
Come on. So anyway, enough out of me. Hello and hugs and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm out of here. Later.
All right, later. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you for the phone call. The phone lines are open now. Earlier in the program, I had made another reference to the fact that we really haven't heard much of anything from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And the supposed vaccine safety commission that Trump promised us. And I stand corrected because somebody just emailed me this article written in April of this year by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and promptly ignored, obviously, by the corporate media. It's apparently being put on out by this magazine called Wise Tradition. They apparently publish a quarterly. And Wise Tradition is part of the Weston A. Price Foundation. And I just posted this to whatreallyhappened.com. And it's talking about the thimerosal travesty. And it gives us a history of thimerosal, who developed it, how it was put into usage. And interestingly enough, there is another clear case of research shenanigans. And it's almost along the lines of when Monsanto was testing Roundup and GMO corn on rats, and they ended the study at 3 months and said, everything's okay, the product is safe, even though they wouldn't serve GMO in their own company cafeteria at the time. Then, of course, that French study came on out and said, well, the medical problems start showing up at month number 4. And Monsanto used their economic and political influence to get that article pulled. Then it was reinstated. Back and forth, back and forth. Well, according to this article written by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., apparently during the early tests of whether thimerosal was safe to use, they did basically the same thing. They had animals. Apparently, this was all the way back in 1931. Animals seemed to tolerate high doses of thimerosal, but many of those animals died of evident mercury poisoning just days after the study ended. So again, the research is out there, and this is 1931. This is even before I was born, and the stuff is just, it really is compromised science. It's hard to know what you're dealing in this universe, as it were. Okay, people are still complaining about Bayer and Monsanto's merger, and they're still reminding everybody of how Bayer managed to give thousands of people HIV with a contaminated hemophilia medicine. We've talked about that before. Over in Pennsylvania, in Bucks County, apparently people are being awakened at night to what sounds like loud explosions, and police are asking for help in identifying the window rattling, wall shaking noises. Now, maybe somebody out there live firing with their artillery, but it sounds to me like what they're experiencing are sonic booms from something up in the sky traveling faster than the speed of sound and leaving a shockwave. Now, when Claire and I lived in Southern California, we lived in North Hollywood, every time the space shuttle was being brought down into Edwards Air Force Base, we would hear the shockwave. And so we understand exactly what that sounds like. And that may mean that somebody is testing something, and we won't find out what it is for a while. The government does love to keep their secrets here. Every Christmas, I'll put out this little story I wrote years ago about how our town in New Hampshire got tinseled one Christmas. And nobody would say anything about it. And it wasn't until sometime later that the Air Force admitted they were testing an anti-radar chaff and accidentally unloaded a couple of tons of it all over our little town. But it was pretty to see there. There was this one other time, walk down memory lane here, something fell out of the sky very close to our home. And everybody was talking about it. We drove on out to see it. It had landed on an ice pond, and it had melted through the ice, and the outline in the ice was of a clearly symmetrical artificial shape. And the Army showed up and chased us all away and chopped up the ice, and whatever it was, they took it away. So lots of secrets out there. Okay, apparently David Hogg is still out there trying to rally the troops, as it were, for a gun ban. And he's basically starting to act like an extortion artist. He did a die-in protest at a Publix supermarket, demanding that Publix no longer support political candidates who are in turn supported by or support the NRA. And apparently this thing backfired, and a lot of people got very angry about this. And it is a reminder that people don't respond to bullying. And it is a reminder that if you pay a ransom for somebody who's been kidnapped, there'll just be more kidnappings. All right, we're going to take a break here, back with the last segment of our show today after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our program here. Last segment of our program on this Wednesday, Hump Day. Now, I've had this story on my talking points for a few days, and I'm happy to see that it has a positive resolution. Apparently, somebody put out an active shooter game. That's what it's called, active shooter. And players can take on the role of a SWAT team member trying to stop an ongoing school mass shooting, or the role of the shooter themselves. And a lot of people came on out and said this is wholly inappropriate, and I tend to agree. And people were just outraged at this thing, and I could understand that a lot, and I hope people just wouldn't actually think about buying this. But apparently the app now has been withdrawn because of the public outcry. It is a very inappropriate thing. On a general note, by and large, most computer games do seem to be about violence. Now, some are not. There's, what is it, Forge of Empires, where you're actually out there trying to build a city and a civilization. And I'd like to see more games like that, that appeal to and encourage, shall we say, our more civilized functions, rather than just have a gun or a sword and shooting everything that moves. I don't know about you, that wears out real quick. But again, I don't play computer games. The only computer games I have are flight simulators. And yes, when I was younger, I would dogfight the other planes. But these days, you know, I'm just happy taking a passenger plane from Honolulu to Maui and back. Yep, I'm a pilot. What can I tell you? Apparently, Tesla is in trouble again. One of their cars in the semi-autonomous autopilot crashed into a parked police car. And Tesla is now saying that apparently the autopilot function is not designed to avoid a collision, and says that drivers should not rely on it entirely. Well, I think that's a big reason people pay that money for the Tesla, is that it supposedly can drive itself. And for them to come on out and now admit that the autopilot is not designed to avoid a collision, that to me is a really big hole. Now, I'm a fan of electric cars in general, and I have been a fan of Tesla, but it looks to me like their most recent offerings have been value engineered, and it's probably because they're running out of money, they're running at a loss. They just slapdash something together, put it on out there to try and sell it. And we're seeing that from too many American corporations right now. We're not talking about something you use in your home like a hair dryer, where if it fails, you just, okay, throw it in the trash. We're talking about a car, carrying people, carrying your family, carrying your loved ones, and crashing into stuff. It's amazing here. Meanwhile, over in Japan, as you know, people are very comfortable with the idea of computers and robots. And apparently, there is now a Buddhist temple offering a funeral service for robot dogs for the owners of the Aibos, which was actually a pretty cool little robot. And it cost about $3,000, and it's quite convincing. And people apparently got very attached. And when they quit working, now they can have a Buddhist funeral service. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots and lots of interesting things to share with you. And we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.